What if the person you thought you knew best was hiding a deadly secret? After Eleanor Whitman's unexpected death, her husband Nathaniel believed her wealth and legacy were his for the taking. But Ellie had other plans. From cryptic diary entries to a mysterious safe, she left behind a web of clues designed to expose the lies that Nathaniel built his life upon. As her secrets unravel, so does Nathaniel's control, with her nephew Ryan and a determined detective closing in. Lies, betrayal, and a dangerous affair threaten to destroy everything Nathaniel has fought to protect. But Ellie's haunting words linger. The truth always comes out. Watch the full story to uncover Ellie's master plan and the shocking consequences it holds for everyone involved. Subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories filled with suspense and unforgettable twists. Now, at Ellie's funeral, the day Nathaniel's carefully crafted world began to crumble. The golden rays of the Charleston sun filtered through the Spanish moss draped over ancient oaks, casting a dappled light across the expansive cemetery. The mourners gathered in solemn clusters, their whispered condolences blending with the faint rustle of the breeze. A soft scent of lilies hung in the air, mingling with the salty tang from the nearby marshes. It was a picturesque southern afternoon, yet beneath the serene facade, a storm was brewing. Nathaniel Ellis stood at the forefront of the gathering, his broad shoulders clad in a perfectly tailored navy suit. His chiseled jaw was tight, and his piercing grey eyes glimmered with the sheen of unshed tears, or so it seemed. He placed a steady hand on the polished mahogany casket, his voice low and tremulous. "Rest in peace, Ellie," he murmured, his words barely audible over the quiet sobs of those around him. The finality of the moment pressed down on the crowd, but Nathaniel's gaze flickered, just for a moment, toward a figure standing at the back of the mourners. Camille Brooks. Her jet-black hair was pulled into a tight chignon, and her sleek black dress clung to her figure, elegant yet understated. She held a tissue delicately in one hand, dabbing at her eyes, though they remained suspiciously dry. Camille's almond-shaped eyes caught Nathaniel's, a fleeting glance filled with unspoken promises and calculated reassurance. The priest's somber voice droned on, offering prayers for Eleanor Whitman's soul. "May she find eternal peace," he intoned, his words heavy with the weight of tradition. But Nathaniel wasn't listening. His mind churned with the memory of the phone call that had shattered his composure the night before. "Mr. Ellis, you must attend the reading of the will tomorrow morning," Sophia Garrett, Eleanor's trusted attorney, had said. Her tone had been clipped, almost cold. "Your late wife made adjustments to her estate shortly before her passing. You'll want to be present." Adjustments. The word had lingered in his mind like an ominous echo. Ellie hadn't mentioned anything, no hint, no warning. Just weeks ago they'd dined together at their usual table at the Charleston Yacht Club, exchanging pleasantries over seared scallops and aged wine. Now, here he stood, burying her, and the very fortune he had long planned to inherit seemed poised to slip from his grasp. The crowd began to disperse as the ceremony concluded. Friends and distant relatives offered their condolences, clasping Nathaniel's hands and murmuring words that blurred into a meaningless hum. He nodded mechanically, his well-practiced expression of grief intact. "Uncle Nate." The voice was steady, almost confrontational, breaking through the haze of muttered sympathies. Nathaniel turned to face Ryan Whitman, Ellie's nephew. The younger man's face was drawn, his green eyes rimmed with red but sharp, unyielding. He wore a charcoal grey suit that hung slightly loose on his lean frame, as though grief had physically worn him down. "Ryan," Nathaniel said smoothly, extending a hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss. She loved you like a son." Ryan didn't immediately take the offered hand. His gaze held Nathaniel's, unflinching, before he finally grasped it. She was a remarkable woman, far too good for this world. Yes, Nathaniel agreed, forcing a small smile. Far too good. There was a moment of charged silence between them, and for the first time that day, Nathaniel felt a sliver of unease. Ryan had always been close to Ellie, far closer than Nathaniel had ever been. It was no secret that she had doted on her nephew, treating him more like a son than an heir. That connection had been a thorn in Nathaniel's side for years, a quiet, persistent reminder that he had never been the center of Ellie's world. "Do you think she knew?" Ryan asked suddenly, his voice low but weighted with meaning. Nathaniel blinked, caught off guard. Knew what? Ryan's lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tightening. "Never mind," he said after a beat, his tone curt. He released Nathaniel's hand and walked away, leaving behind a trail of unspoken accusations. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, steadying himself. As he turned to leave, he felt a light touch on his elbow. Camille had appeared at his side, her face a mask of solemn concern. "You handled that well," she said quietly, her voice soft but edged with steel. "He's clearly suspicious." "Ryan's always been suspicious," Nathaniel muttered, leading her toward his black Mercedes. "Ellie spoiled him rotten. He thinks the whole world owes him something." "And the will?" Camille pressed, keeping her voice low. "Do you think she—" "Don't start," Nathaniel snapped, cutting her off. He glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. "We'll find out tomorrow. Until then, keep your composure." Camille nodded, her expression unreadable. She slid into the passenger seat, her movements smooth and deliberate. Nathaniel started the engine, the low hum of the car providing a momentary distraction from the unease gnawing at him. As they drove away from the cemetery, the oppressive weight of Ryan's words lingered. Did Ellie know? The question hung in the air like a spectre, haunting him even as he tried to dismiss it. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. At the grand estate where Ellie had spent her final days, Nathaniel sat alone in the study. The room was filled with her presence, the faint scent of her favorite lavender candles, the delicate china she'd collected from her travels, the books she'd read and reread over the years. It all felt suffocating now, like a mausoleum. His phone buzzed, shattering the silence. He snatched it up, his pulse quickening. "Mr. Ellis," came Sophia Garrett's crisp voice. "Just a reminder. Tomorrow at 10 sharp, the courthouse." "I'll be there," Nathaniel said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "And Mr. Ellis—" Sophia hesitated, an uncharacteristic pause that made his stomach tighten. "I strongly advise you to prepare yourself. Eleanor was thorough." The line went dead before Nathaniel could respond. He stared at the phone in his hand, his mind racing. Thorough. The word carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Ellie had always been meticulous, always one step ahead. Was it possible she had seen through him in the end? As the clock struck midnight, Nathaniel remained in the study, staring out the window at the moonlit garden below. He was a man accustomed to control, to meticulous planning and flawless execution. But now, for the first time in years, he felt the ground shifting beneath him. Tomorrow, everything would change, one way or another. The morning sunlight filtered through the gauzy curtains of Nathaniel's downtown penthouse, painting the polished floors with streaks of amber and gold. Outside, the hum of Charleston stirred to life, but within the quiet walls of his home, an eerie calm settled like an invisible weight. Nathaniel Ellis stood in front of a large mirror, methodically tying the knot on his deep grey silk tie. His reflection stared back at him, calm, composed, and rehearsed. Yet beneath the surface, his mind was anything but steady. The soft chime of his phone broke the silence. He glanced at the screen. Camille. With a sigh, he pressed the green button and held the phone to his ear. "Morning." Her voice purred, low and deliberate. "You ready for today?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Nathaniel replied, his tone clipped. "Are you on your way?" "I'm parked a block away," she said. "Didn't think it would be appropriate to pull up right in front of the courthouse. You know, considering." Considering. That single word sent a ripple of annoyance through him. "Wise decision," he said curtly. "Stay discreet." "I always am," Camille replied, a hint of irritation slipping into her voice. "Nathaniel, relax. We've got this." He ended the call without responding and slipped his phone into his pocket. Despite her reassurances, he couldn't shake the growing knot of tension in his chest. Today wasn't just about reading Ellie's will. It was about preserving the carefully constructed image he'd spent years cultivating. Any crack in that facade could send his world crumbling down. Nathaniel grabbed his tailored suit jacket and stepped into the private elevator, descending to the building's underground garage. As he climbed into his sleek black sedan, he took a deep breath, steeling himself. The courthouse wasn't far, but the weight of the journey felt immeasurable. The streets of Charleston were alive with the bustle of a weekday morning. Tourists strolled along cobblestone paths, snapping photos of historic homes, while locals hurried past, engrossed in their daily routines. Nathaniel barely noticed. His focus remained on the day ahead, replaying scenarios in his mind like a chess master, anticipating every possible move. When he arrived at the courthouse, the imposing stone building loomed before him, its stately columns bathed in the warm morning light. A few people lingered near the steps, faces he recognized from Ellie's funeral. Their quiet conversations hushed as he approached, their gazes following him with a mix of curiosity and subtle judgment. "Nathaniel." The voice was sharp and familiar, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. He turned to see Ryan Whitman standing near the courthouse doors, his hands shoved into the pockets of his dark suit. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes gleamed with something Nathaniel couldn't quite place. Resolve, perhaps, or defiance. "Ryan," Nathaniel said evenly, forcing a polite smile. "I didn't expect you here so early." Ryan shrugged. "Ellie was family. Of course I'd be here." Nathaniel inclined his head, the gesture measured. "A testament to your devotion. She always spoke so highly of you." "And you," Ryan replied, his words laced with a subtle edge. Before Nathaniel could respond, the courthouse doors creaked open, and Sophia Garrett stepped into view. Sophia was as composed as ever, her tailored navy dress and polished heels exuding quiet authority. Her sharp eyes flicked between the two men before she spoke. "Gentlemen, we're ready. Please follow me." Nathaniel adjusted his cuffs and ascended the steps, his heartbeat steady but heavy. Camille joined him just as they reached the doors, her expression poised but tense. Inside, the courthouse conference room was cool and austere, with high ceilings and heavy wooden furniture. A single long table dominated the space, flanked by chairs that creaked faintly as the attendees took their seats. At the head of the table sat Sophia, her leather-bound briefcase resting beside her. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice measured. "As you know, Mrs. Eleanor Whitman made amendments to her will shortly before her passing. I will be reading the revised document in full today." Nathaniel's gaze flicked to Ryan, who sat across from him with a calm but watchful demeanor. Camille remained by Nathaniel's side, her hands clasped in her lap, her knuckles faintly white. Sophia began to read, her voice carrying through the room with deliberate precision. The initial portions were standard, bequests to charities Ellie had supported, provisions for long-time employees, and minor distributions to distant relatives. But then the tone shifted. "To my husband, Nathaniel Ellis," Sophia read, her eyes lifting briefly to meet his. "I leave a conditional share of my estate, contingent upon the resolution of certain personal matters outlined in a private addendum. A murmur rippled through the room. Nathaniel stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Conditional?" he echoed, his voice carefully neutral. Sophia ignored his interruption and continued. "The remainder of my estate, including the family trust, I leave to my nephew, Ryan Whitman." Nathaniel's breath hitched, though he quickly masked his reaction. Beside him, Camille's composure faltered, her lips parting in barely concealed shock. Ryan, however, remained impassive, his gaze fixed firmly on Nathaniel. "This is absurd," Nathaniel said, his voice rising slightly. "Ellie never mentioned any conditions." Sophia clasped her hands together, her expression unyielding. "The conditions are detailed in the addendum, which I will now provide to Mr. Ellis privately." She slid a sealed envelope across the table toward Nathaniel. He hesitated before picking it up, his fingers tightening around the crisp paper. "What does it say?" Camille whispered under her breath, leaning toward him. Nathaniel didn't answer. His mind raced, a storm of indignation and unease swirling within him. He broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside, his eyes scanning the words with increasing urgency. "Nathaniel," Ellie's familiar handwriting began, her tone unmistakably firm even in death. "By now you've realized that I knew more than I let on. This isn't just about the money, it's about the truth. You've always prided yourself on being in control, but control is a fleeting illusion. The conditions of this will aren't arbitrary. They are the consequences of your choices." His hands trembled as he finished reading, the weight of Ellie's words pressing down on him like an iron vise. He looked up to find Ryan watching him, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Something wrong, Uncle Nate?" Ryan asked, his voice dripping with feigned innocence. Nathaniel forced a tight smile, though the edges of his facade were beginning to crack. "Nothing I can't handle." Sophia cleared her throat, reclaiming the room's attention. "Mr. Ellis, you have 30 days to fulfill the conditions outlined in the addendum. Failure to do so will result in forfeiture of your claim to the estate." The words hung in the air, a heavy verdict that sent a ripple of tension through the room. Nathaniel's mind raced, his carefully laid plans unraveling with each passing second. Camille shifted uncomfortably beside him, her earlier confidence now a distant memory. As the meeting concluded, Nathaniel rose from his seat, his movements stiff and deliberate. Ryan lingered near the door, his posture relaxed, but his eyes keen. "Best of luck," Ryan said, his tone pointed. "You'll need it." Nathaniel didn't respond. He stepped into the corridor, his breath coming faster now, the veneer of control slipping away. Camille caught up to him, her voice low and urgent. "What are we going to do?" she demanded. "What's in that letter?" Nathaniel stopped abruptly, turning to face her. His grey eyes were cold, calculated, and filled with a determination that bordered on desperation. "Whatever it takes," he said, his voice a sharp whisper. "We're not losing this." As they walked toward the courthouse exit, the weight of Ellie's final move settled over them. The game had only just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. Nathaniel stood in the center of his dimly lit study, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. He clutched Ellie's letter in one hand, the paper now crumpled from his tightening grip. His eyes scanned the ornate shelves filled with books he'd never read, his mind racing with calculations, doubts, and the gnawing sense of betrayal. Ellie had played him. From beyond the grave, she had managed to turn his carefully orchestrated plans into a crumbling house of cards. The conditions in her addendum weren't just obstacles, they were a direct challenge, each word of her letter dripping with intent. She had known. Nathaniel slammed his fist against the desk, rattling the glass paperweight that sat atop it. The sharp sound echoed through the quiet room. "What's in the letter?" Camille's voice cut through the tension. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, her usually composed face etched with concern. Nathaniel turned, his expression dark. "It's worse than I thought," he said, his voice low and controlled. "She didn't just leave conditions, she's practically set a trap. If I don't figure out what she's hiding, I lose everything." Camille moved closer, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. "What kind of trap?" she asked, her voice hushed, as though the walls themselves might betray them. He exhaled sharply, shoving the letter into her hands. "Read it for yourself." She unfolded the letter and scanned its contents, her brows knitting together as she read Ellie's pointed words. By the time she finished, her hands trembled slightly, but she quickly masked her reaction. This doesn't make sense," she said, her voice faltering. "What truths is she talking about? What could she have known?" "That's exactly what we need to find out," Nathaniel said, pacing the room like a caged predator. "Ellie was always meticulous, always keeping something in reserve. She never trusted me completely, and now it's coming back to haunt me." Camille hesitated. "What if she knew about us?" she asked quietly. Nathaniel stopped mid-stride, his sharp eyes narrowing as they locked onto hers. "She didn't." "You don't know that," Camille countered, her voice gaining an edge. "What if she suspected? What if that's why she made these changes?" "Then she would have confronted me," Nathaniel snapped. "Ellie wasn't subtle. If she thought I was unfaithful, she would have made it clear. This is something else." Camille opened her mouth to argue, but stopped when the sound of Nathaniel's phone buzzing filled the room. He snatched it off the desk, glancing at the screen. The name, Sophia Garrett, glowed back at him. "Perfect timing," he muttered, answering the call. "Sophia." "Mr. Ellis." Sophia's voice was professional but clipped. "I wanted to check in and ensure you understood the terms outlined in the will. I realize this situation is unique." Nathaniel forced a calm tone. "I understand, Sophia. What I don't understand is why Ellie made such drastic changes without discussing them with me." "Eleanor was a private person," Sophia replied, her words measured. "She had her reasons, and I'm not at liberty to share everything. But I will say this. She cared deeply about leaving her legacy intact. Perhaps she wanted to ensure it wasn't squandered." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Squandered? I built her empire alongside her, Sophia. I deserve that legacy." There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough to be unsettling. "If that's the case," Sophia said finally, "then I suggest you prove it. Good luck, Mr. Ellis." The call ended abruptly, leaving Nathaniel gripping the phone like a lifeline. Camille watched him carefully, her expression a mix of unease and determination. "She knows something," Camille said. "You heard her tone." "Of course she does," Nathaniel replied, slamming the phone onto the desk. "And Ryan knows even more. That smug little bastard is enjoying this." Camille stepped closer, her voice softening. "So, what's the plan? How do we fix this?" Nathaniel's mind churned, calculating the next move. "We start with the obvious. Ellie's diary. She mentioned in the will that it held clues. I'll go through every page if I have to." "And Ryan?" Camille asked. "He's not going to sit back and let you waltz away with the estate." Nathaniel smirked, though there was no humor in it. "Let me worry about Ryan. He thinks he's clever, but he's just a child playing a game he doesn't understand." Camille hesitated again, her gaze lingering on him. "Nathaniel, if this goes wrong—" "It won't," he said firmly, cutting her off. "I won't let it." That evening, The study became a battlefield. Nathaniel pored over Ellie's diary, the leather-bound book spread open on his desk. Each entry was written in her elegant, looping handwriting, chronicling years of her life in vivid detail. The entries were a mix of mundane observations and sharp insights, but nothing overtly incriminating, until he reached the final months of her life. The tone of Ellie's writing shifted, becoming more reflective, almost cryptic. "I've always believed in the power of intuition," one entry read. "It's what led me to success, but it's also what's kept me alive in a world full of predators." Nathaniel frowned, his fingers tracing the words. Was she referring to him? To Ryan? To someone else entirely? Further entries mentioned conversations with Ryan, moments of laughter and shared memories. There was no bitterness in her words, only warmth. Yet her entries about Nathaniel were starkly different. "He's brilliant," she had written, "but brilliance without integrity is a dangerous thing." Nathaniel slammed the book shut, his breath coming faster. Ellie had known, maybe not everything, but enough to plant seeds of doubt, enough to take precautions. A knock at the door startled him. Camille stepped inside, her face pale. "There's someone outside," she said, her voice low. "A man. He's been sitting in a car across the street for the past hour." Nathaniel's stomach tightened. "Did he see you?" "I don't think so," Camille replied. "But he's watching the house." Nathaniel moved to the window, peering through the curtains. Sure enough, a black sedan idled on the other side of the street. The silhouette of a figure in the driver's seat was just visible in the dim light. "Ryan," Nathaniel muttered, his jaw clenching. "He's keeping tabs on me." "What do we do?" Camille asked, her voice trembling slightly. Nathaniel turned to her, his eyes cold and calculating. "We don't panic. He wants to play games. Fine. Let him watch. He'll learn nothing." But as he returned to the diary, his confidence wavered. Ellie's words haunted him, a silent reminder that the truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it was buried. And this time, he wasn't sure if he could keep it hidden. The early morning mist clung to the cobblestone streets of Charleston, wrapping the city in a shroud of quiet mystery. Nathaniel sat in the study, the remnants of a sleepless night etched into his face. The leather-bound diary lay open on the desk before him, Ellie's elegant handwriting illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp. He'd read her final entries over and over, but they refused to yield the answers he so desperately needed. The knock on the door startled him, sharp and deliberate. His gaze snapped toward it, his pulse quickening. Before he could rise, Camille appeared in the doorway, her expression tight. "Detective Alan Hughes," she whispered. "He's here." Nathaniel froze. The name carried weight, like the ominous toll of a bell. Slowly he stood, smoothing the front of his shirt. "Did he say what he wants?" "He's asking questions," Camille said, her voice tense. "About Ellie." Nathaniel's mind raced. Hughes was no ordinary detective. He was a tenacious investigator with a reputation for digging up dirt no one else could. If he was here, it wasn't a courtesy call. It was a threat. "Show him into the sitting room," Nathaniel said finally, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "I'll handle it." Camille hesitated, her eyes searching his. "Are you sure? Maybe I should stay." "No," Nathaniel said sharply. "Go upstairs. Let me deal with this." Camille nodded reluctantly and disappeared down the hall. Nathaniel straightened his tie, inhaled deeply, and stepped into the sitting room. Detective Hughes stood near the window, his back to the room. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by years of chasing truths no one wanted uncovered. His sharp eyes turned to meet Nathaniel's as he entered, and for a moment the room felt smaller. "Mr. Ellis," Hughes said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "Thank you for seeing me so early." "Detective," Nathaniel replied, extending a hand. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Hughes ignored the gesture, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his coat. "I understand you were close to your wife, Eleanor," he said, his tone even but probing. "Her passing must have been quite the blow." Nathaniel forced a somber expression. "It's been difficult," he said. "Ellie was irreplaceable." Hughes arched a brow, the faintest hint of skepticism flickering across his face. "I'm sure. She seemed like an extraordinary woman." "She was," Nathaniel said. "Is there a reason for this visit, Detective?" "I assume this isn't just a condolence call." Hughes smiled faintly, a wolfish glint in his eyes. "Straight to the point. I can appreciate that." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, flipping it open. "We've been reviewing some of Mrs. Whitman's medical records. Interesting reading, to say the least." Nathaniel's stomach tightened. "Medical records?" "Yes," Hughes said, his tone casual but razor-sharp. "You see, it's not every day a perfectly healthy woman in her early 40s dies of a sudden heart attack, especially not someone as meticulous as your wife." Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Yet." Hughes's eyes bore into him, unflinching. "But we've come across a few anomalies that require further investigation. Routine, of course." Nathaniel's fists curled at his sides, but he forced a calm smile. "I understand. If there's anything I can do to assist, you only have to ask." Hughes held his gaze for a beat longer, then closed the notebook. "I'll keep that in mind. For now, I'd advise you to stay close. Something tells me this is going to get complicated." With that, the detective turned and left, leaving Nathaniel standing in the center of the room, the air around him heavy with unspoken accusations. By the time Camille reappeared, Nathaniel was back in the study, pacing like a caged animal. She hovered in the doorway, her face pale. "What did he say?" she asked. "He knows something," Nathaniel muttered, his voice tight with frustration. "Or he's fishing. Either way, it's not good." Camille hesitated, then stepped closer. "Do you think he suspects us?" "He suspects everyone," Nathaniel snapped. "That's his job." "Then what do we do?" she pressed, her voice trembling. "If he digs too deep." "He won't," Nathaniel said, cutting her off, "because we're not going to give him anything to find." Camille didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "What about Ryan? He's been circling like a vulture since the will reading. What if he's working with Hughes?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. The thought hadn't escaped him. Ryan was a loose thread, one that needed to be dealt with sooner rather than later. "I'll handle Ryan," he said finally. "For now, focus on the diary. Ellie's playing games, and if we don't figure out her next move, we're finished." That night, the tension in the house was palpable. Nathaniel and Camille worked in silence, scouring the diary for any clue that might unlock Ellie's intentions. But the entries grew more cryptic, each one hinting at something just out of reach. "I can't do this anymore," Camille said suddenly, her voice breaking. She pushed the diary away and buried her face in her hands. "It's like she's taunting us from the grave." Nathaniel reached for her, his touch firm but not unkind. "We don't have a choice," he said. "If we stop now, we lose everything." Camille looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Do you ever think about what we've done? About her?" Nathaniel's expression hardened. "What's done is done. Regret won't change anything." The sound of a car engine idling outside drew their attention. Nathaniel moved to the window, parting the curtains just enough to see the black sedan parked across the street. "He's back," Nathaniel muttered. "Ryan?" Camille whispered. Nathaniel nodded, his mind racing. He's waiting for something. Or someone. As the hours dragged on, the car remained. Nathaniel's nerves were stretched thin, every shadow and creak of the house setting him on edge. By the time dawn broke, he knew one thing with certainty. Ryan wasn't going to back down. Neither was he. Nathaniel turned from the window, his eyes cold and determined. "It's time to change the game," he said, his voice low. "If Ryan wants a fight, I'll give him one." Camille stared at him, her expression a mix of fear and reluctant resolve. "What are you going to do?" Nathaniel's lips curled into a grim smile. "Whatever it takes." Nathaniel sat alone in his study, the morning light struggling to penetrate the heavy drapes that covered the windows. The house was oppressively silent, save for the faint ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. His mind was a storm of fragmented thoughts, each one darker than the last. Across the desk, Ellie's diary sat open, its pages mocking him with their cryptic clues and unanswered questions. He could almost hear her voice in his head, calm and knowing. "You'll never truly understand me, Nathaniel." His hand tightened into a fist, slamming against the desk. The sound echoed through the room, and he exhaled sharply, forcing himself to steady his breathing. She wasn't here. She couldn't be. But somehow, she was still controlling everything. Her words, her conditions, her meticulous planning, ensnaring him in a web of his own desperation. Camille appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. She held her phone in one hand, the glow from the screen highlighting the tension etched into her features. "There's something you need to see," she said, her voice tight. "What now?" Nathaniel snapped, though his frustration wasn't aimed at her. He motioned for her to enter, and she hesitated before crossing the threshold. She handed him the phone, and he scanned the screen. A headline stared back at him, the bold letters slicing through his composure. Questions surrounding Eleanor Whitman's death. New details emerge. Nathaniel's eyes darted to the byline. Claire Morales. His jaw tightened. "That reporter," Camille said, her voice trembling slightly. "She was at the funeral, wasn't she? I thought she was just some family friend." "She's more than that," Nathaniel muttered. "Claire's been circling for years, digging into my business, Ellie's affairs, anything that smells like a story. And now this." Camille gestured toward the phone. "What if she finds something? What if—" "She won't," Nathaniel interrupted, his voice hard. "Because there's nothing to find. Ellie died of a heart attack. That's the truth." Camille raised an eyebrow, her skepticism plain. "Is it?" Nathaniel shot her a sharp look. "Don't start." She threw her hands up defensively. "I'm just saying, if Hughes and Ryan are working together, and now Claire's involved, it's too many eyes, Nathaniel. Too many loose ends." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. "Then we tighten them." Camille crossed her arms, watching him closely. "And how do you plan to do that?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the diary, then to the small stack of papers beside it, the financial records he'd been combing through for days. Ellie's meticulous bookkeeping had always been a thorn in his side, but now he was certain it held the key to understanding her final move. "I need time," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "If they want to play games, let them. We'll play better." Camille sighed, her shoulders sagging. "Time isn't exactly on our side, Nathaniel. Hughes is already circling, and Ryan is a problem I can handle," Nathaniel said, cutting her off. "Let me worry about him." Before Camille could respond, the faint hum of a car engine drew their attention. She moved to the window, parting the curtain just enough to peek outside. "It's him," she said quietly. "The same car from last night." Nathaniel rose from his chair, his movements deliberate. He joined her at the window, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the black sedan parked across the street. Ryan was in the driver's seat, his posture relaxed but watchful. "He's not even trying to hide it," Camille muttered. "What's his endgame?" Nathaniel's lips curled into a grim smile. "He wants me to make a mistake, but he'll be waiting a long time." Camille frowned, but before she could reply, Nathaniel turned and strode toward the door. "Stay here," he said over his shoulder. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice rising with alarm. "Ending this," Nathaniel said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He stepped outside, the morning air crisp against his skin. The faint smell of jasmine from the garden mingled with the faint tang of salt from the harbour. He walked down the driveway, his steps measured and deliberate, until he stood a few feet from the sedan. Ryan rolled down the window, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Morning, Uncle Nate," Ryan said, his voice casual. "Nice day, isn't it?" "What do you want, Ryan?" Nathaniel asked, his tone devoid of warmth. Ryan shrugged, his smirk widening. "Just enjoying the view. You've got quite the house here." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Don't play coy. You've been sitting outside my house for hours. What are you after?" Ryan leaned forward, resting his arms on the steering wheel. "Answers," he said simply. "Ellie trusted me. She told me things, shared things with me that you wouldn't understand. And I'm going to make sure her wishes are honored." "Her wishes?" Nathaniel echoed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mean the ones that conveniently put you in charge of her estate?" Ryan's smirk vanished, replaced by a steely glare. "This isn't about money, it's about justice." Nathaniel took a step closer, his expression darkening. "Be careful, Ryan. Accusations like that can have consequences." "So can lies," Ryan shot back. "I know what you did, Nathaniel, and I won't stop until the truth comes out." For a moment, the two men stood in tense silence, the weight of their words hanging between them. Finally, Ryan leaned back, his smirk returning. "See you around, Uncle Nate," he said, rolling up the window. Nathaniel watched as the sedan pulled away, his fists clenched at his sides. When he turned back toward the house, Camille was standing in the doorway, her face pale. "What did he say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing I didn't already know," Nathaniel replied. He brushed past her, his mind already working on the next move. By the time night fell, the house was silent once more. Nathaniel sat in the study, the diary open before him. He traced his finger along the final entry, his eyes narrowing as he read the words again. "Trust is earned, Nathaniel, and sometimes it's broken, but the truth always comes out in the end." A chill ran down his spine, but he pushed it aside. He wasn't going to let Ellie win. Not now, not ever. He closed the diary, his expression hardening. The game wasn't over. Not yet. And he was just getting started. The sound of gravel crunching under tires broke the early evening stillness as Nathaniel's car pulled into the driveway of a secluded lake house. The dense canopy of trees around the property cast shadows that seemed to stretch and reach for the fading sunlight. Camille sat in the passenger seat, her fingers nervously drumming against her thigh. "Why here?" she asked, breaking the tense silence that had accompanied them for the hour-long drive. Nathaniel killed the engine and turned to face her. "Ellie spent a lot of time here toward the end. If there's anything she wanted hidden, anything she didn't want me to find, it's going to be here." Camille's brow furrowed. "And what if Ryan knows about this place too?" Nathaniel smirked, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Let him. He won't get here before us." He stepped out of the car, the cool air biting against his skin. The lake house stood as it always had, its weathered wood blending seamlessly into the wilderness around it. The windows, dark and uninviting, reflected nothing but the trees and the faint glow of the setting sun. Nathaniel grabbed a flashlight from the car and motioned for Camille to follow. The door creaked as he pushed it open, the sound reverberating through the empty house. Dust hung in the air, catching the beam of the flashlight as Nathaniel swept it across the room. The faint scent of aged wood and forgotten memories clung to the space. "This place gives me the creeps," Camille muttered, wrapping her arms around herself. "It's just a house," Nathaniel replied, though even he wasn't convinced. There was something unsettling about the silence, something that felt almost watchful. They moved through the rooms methodically, their footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors. Nathaniel's eyes scanned every surface, every piece of furniture, every corner, searching for something. He wasn't even sure what. All he knew was that Ellie had always been meticulous, and if she'd hidden something here, it wouldn't be obvious. In the living room, Camille paused in front of a framed photograph on the mantel. It was a picture of Ellie, standing by the lake, her hair blowing in the wind and her smile radiant. "She looks so happy," Camille said softly. Nathaniel glanced at the photo, his jaw tightening. She was good at pretending. Camille shot him a look. "Or maybe she was just good at hiding how much you hurt her." Nathaniel turned away, ignoring the sting of her words. "Check the kitchen," he said. "Look for anything that seems out of place." Camille hesitated, then nodded, disappearing down the hall. Nathaniel remained in the living room, his eyes lingering on the photograph. For a moment, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. Had he underestimated Ellie? Had he pushed her too far without realizing it? He shook the thoughts away and focused. Ellie's diary had mentioned the lake house, cryptic as always, but it had been enough to bring him here. Somewhere in this house was the key to understanding her final move, and he wasn't leaving without it. In the corner of the room, an old writing desk caught his eye. It was one of Ellie's favorite pieces, a family heirloom she'd insisted on keeping, despite its worn appearance. Nathaniel approached it, running his hand over the smooth wood. He pulled open the drawers one by one, finding nothing but blank notepads and faded stationery, until the last drawer. It was locked. Nathaniel frowned, crouching to inspect it more closely. The lock was old, simple. He could break it if he had to, but something told him not to rush. Ellie would have anticipated that. She would have expected him to look here. He stood and scanned the room, his eyes falling on a small key hanging from a hook near the fireplace. It seemed almost too convenient, but he grabbed it anyway and returned to the desk. The key fit perfectly, and with a soft click, the drawer slid open. Inside was a single envelope, sealed with Ellie's distinctive monogram. Nathaniel stared at it for a moment, his heart pounding. He reached for it, his fingers brushing against the thick paper, when a voice from the doorway froze him in place. "Find what you were looking for?" Nathaniel turned sharply, the envelope clutched in his hand. Ryan stood in the doorway, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. Camille appeared behind him, her face pale. "How did you—" Nathaniel began, but Ryan cut him off. "This place was Ellie's sanctuary," Ryan said, stepping into the room. "Of course I knew about it. You think she didn't tell me?" Nathaniel's grip on the envelope tightened. "This doesn't concern you." Ryan's gaze dropped to the envelope, then back to Nathaniel. "Doesn't it? Ellie trusted me. She wanted me to know the truth." "Then why didn't she leave everything to you outright?" Nathaniel countered, his voice rising. "If you were so important to her, why the games? Why the diary? Why the damn conditions?" Ryan took another step forward, his eyes blazing. "Because she wanted you to face what you've done." Nathaniel's chest heaved, his composure cracking. "You don't know anything." "I know enough," Ryan shot back. "I know about the lies, the manipulation, the way you used her." "Shut up," Nathaniel growled, his voice trembling with anger. "You don't get to judge me. You were nothing to her but a pet project, a stand-in for the child she never had." Ryan flinched, but he didn't back down. "You can keep telling yourself that, Nathaniel, but we both know the truth. She saw through you, and now everyone else will too." The room was electric, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. Camille stood frozen near the doorway, her eyes darting between the two men. For a moment it seemed as though the confrontation might turn physical, but then Ryan stepped back, his expression hardening. "You can keep the envelope," he said coldly, "but it won't save you." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Nathaniel standing in the center of the room, the envelope trembling in his hand. Camille moved to his side, her voice barely above a whisper. "What now?" Nathaniel didn't answer. He tore open the envelope, his eyes scanning the letter inside. Ellie's words were as sharp as ever, each one a dagger aimed at his heart. "By now, you've realized the truth isn't something you can bury, Nathaniel. It always finds a way to rise to the surface. Just like the past." He crumpled the letter in his hand, his face a mask of fury. "We go deeper," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Whatever Ellie thought she knew, whatever Ryan thinks he has, we destroy it. All of it." Camille swallowed hard but nodded. "And if we can't?" Nathaniel's eyes burned with a cold, unrelenting fire. "Failure isn't an option." The sharp scent of burnt coffee filled the air as Nathaniel sat in the dimly lit cafe, his fingers drumming against the worn wood of the table. Across from him, Camille fidgeted, her eyes darting nervously to the large window overlooking the bustling Charleston street. Outside, life moved on in its usual chaotic rhythm, oblivious to the storm brewing inside the cafe. "You're too calm," Camille whispered, leaning forward. Ryan could be telling Hughes everything, every single thing. Nathaniel's lips twitched into a faint, humorless smile. "Ryan's smarter than he looks. He won't make a move unless he's sure it'll destroy me." "And if he is sure," Camille pressed, her voice rising slightly, "if he's working with that detective, Nathaniel, this is over." Nathaniel's hand slammed against the table, making the silverware rattle. The couple in the booth beside them glanced over, startled, but Nathaniel didn't care. He leaned in close, his grey eyes boring into Camille's. "Nothing is over," he said, his voice low but seething. "Ellie is gone. Hughes has nothing concrete, and Ryan is playing a game he can't win." Camille swallowed hard, but her voice didn't waver. "What about Claire? That article wasn't just gossip. She's digging, Nathaniel." "I'll deal with Claire," he said sharply. "Let me worry about the reporter. Right now, we focus on the letter." Camille exhaled and leaned back, crossing her arms. "That letter didn't tell us anything we didn't already know. Ellie was angry, paranoid." "She wasn't paranoid," Nathaniel interrupted. His eyes drifted to the window, watching the faint reflection of himself, worn and stretched thin. She was precise. That letter was a challenge. Camille stared at him, her voice quieter now. "What if it's one we can't win?" Nathaniel didn't answer. Instead, he stood abruptly, tossing a 20 onto the table. "Let's go." "Go where?" Camille asked, rising hesitantly. "To the source," Nathaniel said, his tone resolute. "If Ellie left us breadcrumbs, they'll lead back to her estate." Camille hesitated, but something in Nathaniel's expression pushed her to follow him out of the cafe. The drive to the Whitman estate was quiet, the tension between them thick and oppressive. Camille's fingers fidgeted with the hem of her coat as the sprawling gates came into view, looming against the backdrop of Charleston's sprawling marshlands. "You think she hid something here?" Camille asked, her voice soft. Nathaniel nodded. "She kept everything close. If there's one thing Ellie couldn't stand, it was losing control." The gates creaked open, and Nathaniel drove up the long driveway, the estate rising before them like a monument to Ellie's meticulousness. The grandeur of the place was almost suffocating, a constant reminder of everything he stood to lose. Inside, the air was stale, the house unnaturally quiet. Nathaniel led Camille through the main hall, his eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. Every corner of the house seemed untouched, preserved in time like a museum exhibit. "She always spent her mornings in the study," Nathaniel said, his voice distant. "Reading, planning, hiding." Camille followed him into the study, her gaze darting nervously to the tall windows. "Do you think Ryan—" "Forget Ryan," Nathaniel snapped. "Focus." The study was just as he remembered it. Shelves lined with books, a large desk dominating the center of the room. He moved to the desk, his hands methodically rifling through its drawers. "Help me look," he said without turning. Camille hesitated, then began searching the shelves, her fingers running over the spines of the books. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the faint sound of papers being shuffled. "This doesn't feel right," Camille said suddenly, her voice trembling. "It's like she's still here." Nathaniel didn't respond. His hands froze as he pulled out a leather-bound planner from the back of the desk drawer. It wasn't one of Ellie's usual diaries. This was something else. He opened it, his eyes scanning the neatly written entries. "What is it?" Camille asked, moving to his side. Nathaniel's eyes darkened as he read the words on the page. "It's her financial planner," he said slowly. "Every account, every investment, every transfer." Camille frowned. "That's not unusual, is it?" "It is when there's a transfer to an account I don't recognize," Nathaniel muttered. He flipped through the pages, his mind racing. "This isn't hers. It's a trust." "A trust?" Camille echoed. "For what?" Nathaniel shook his head, frustration mounting. "She doesn't say, but she funneled money into it for years, small amounts at first, then larger ones right before she died." "Who's the beneficiary?" Camille asked, her voice urgent. Nathaniel's hand froze over the page. "It doesn't say." The weight of the discovery settled over them like a heavy blanket, suffocating and cold. Camille paced the room, her steps quick and frantic. "This changes everything," she said. "If Hughes or Ryan gets their hands on this—" "They won't," Nathaniel said firmly, closing the planner. "This stays between us." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made them both freeze. Camille moved to the window, her face paling. "It's him," she whispered. "Ryan." Nathaniel cursed under his breath, shoving the planner into his coat. "Get upstairs, now." "What about you?" Camille asked, panic creeping into her voice. "Just go," he hissed. Camille hesitated but obeyed, disappearing up the stairs as Nathaniel moved to the door. He opened it just as Ryan stepped onto the porch, his expression cool and confident. "Uncle Nate," Ryan said, his tone almost mocking. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," Nathaniel replied evenly. "What are you doing here, Ryan?" Ryan tilted his head, his smile faint. "Ellie trusted me with the estate, remember? Thought I'd check in. Make sure everything's in order." Nathaniel stepped forward, his frame blocking the doorway. "Everything is fine." Ryan's gaze flicked past him, scanning the interior. "Looks like you've been busy." "Just tying up loose ends," Nathaniel said, his tone sharp. "Nothing for you to worry about." Ryan's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Funny. Ellie always said you were good at covering your tracks." Nathaniel's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, but it was enough for Ryan to notice. "Careful, Uncle Nate," Ryan said, his voice dropping. "The truth has a way of coming out, whether you're ready for it or not." Nathaniel's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced a tight smile. "Goodbye, Ryan." Ryan's gaze lingered for a moment longer before he turned and walked back to his car. Nathaniel watched as the sedan disappeared down the driveway, his mind racing. Upstairs, Camille was waiting, her face pale and drawn. "What did he say?" "Nothing," Nathaniel replied, though the word felt like a lie. He pulled the planner from his coat and placed it on the desk. "But we need to move fast. Whatever Ellie was hiding, Ryan is getting closer to it." Camille nodded, her voice trembling. "And if he finds it before we do?" Nathaniel's eyes burned with cold determination. "He won't." The night settled heavy over the estate, a thick blanket of darkness punctuated only by the faint hum of crickets and the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. Inside the study, the tension between Nathaniel and Camille was palpable, like the charged air before a thunderstorm. The small desk lamp cast a dim glow, illuminating the planner that now felt like a ticking time bomb. Nathaniel flipped through the pages again, his fingers tightening around the edges of the book. Each entry was meticulous, every transfer deliberate, but the destination of the trust remained maddeningly vague. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations with Ellie, her cryptic smiles, her knowing silences. She had always been 10 steps ahead, and even in death she was proving impossible to outmaneuver. Camille paced the room, her footsteps soft but hurried. "What if it's not about the money?" she blurted, breaking the silence. Nathaniel glanced up, his expression sharp. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ellie wasn't just about wealth," Camille said, her voice trembling with the weight of her thoughts. "What if this trust isn't some final jab at you? What if it's something else entirely?" Nathaniel arched a brow, his patience thinning. "Like what?" Camille stopped pacing, her arms crossing tightly over her chest. What if she was trying to protect something, or someone? The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, his mind shifting gears. "You think this trust was set up for Ryan?" "Maybe," Camille admitted, "but it could be anyone. Ellie had a way of keeping secrets, even from the people closest to her." Nathaniel scoffed, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "She didn't have secrets. She had control. And now she's using it to punish me." Camille opened her mouth to argue, but the sound of a faint creak upstairs stopped her cold. They both froze, their gazes snapping toward the ceiling. "What was that?" Camille whispered, her voice barely audible. Nathaniel grabbed the flashlight from the desk, his grip steady but his jaw tight. "Stay here." "No way," Camille hissed. "I'm not letting you go up there alone." "Camille," Nathaniel began, but the determined look in her eyes silenced him. He nodded reluctantly and motioned for her to follow. They moved cautiously up the grand staircase, the old wood groaning under their steps. The upper floor was cloaked in darkness, the faint moonlight filtering through the windows doing little to dispel the shadows. Nathaniel's flashlight cut a narrow beam through the gloom, illuminating the hallway ahead. The noise came again, a soft rustling, like fabric brushing against wood. It was coming from Ellie's old bedroom. Nathaniel tightened his grip on the flashlight, his pulse quickening. He pushed the door open slowly, the hinges letting out a low groan. The room was exactly as Ellie had left it, her scent faint but lingering. The bed was perfectly made, the furniture arranged with her usual precision, but the closet door was slightly ajar. Nathaniel stepped inside, his breath steady but shallow. Camille lingered in the doorway, her fingers gripping the frame tightly. "Nathaniel?" she whispered, her voice a warning. He ignored her and moved to the closet, his footsteps deliberate. He reached for the handle, his hand hovering for a moment before pulling the door open in one swift motion. The closet was empty, except for a small box sitting on the floor. Nathaniel crouched down, his flashlight illuminating the box. It was old, its surface worn and scratched. but the clasp was still intact. He opened it carefully, his eyes narrowing as he examined its contents. Inside were photographs, letters, and a small leather-bound notebook. The photographs were faded, showing Ellie with people Nathaniel didn't recognize. Smiling faces, unfamiliar places. He picked up one of the letters, his eyes scanning the neat handwriting. "What is it?" Camille asked, stepping closer. Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the notebook, each page revealing more questions than answers. One word, however, kept appearing. Persephone. Persephone, Camille read aloud over his shoulder. What does that mean? Nathaniel's lips pressed into a thin line. It's a name, or a code. For what? Camille pressed. I don't know, Nathaniel admitted, his frustration mounting. But Ellie wouldn't have written it down unless it was important. The faint sound of tires crunching on gravel snapped their attention to the window. Nathaniel moved quickly, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see the driveway below. It's him, he said coldly. Ryan. Camille's face paled. What does he want now? Nathaniel didn't answer. He stuffed the photographs, letters, and notebook back into the box and closed it. Stay here, he ordered. Nathaniel, I said stay here, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Nathaniel descended the stairs 2 at a time, his body tense with anticipation. By the time he reached the front door, Ryan was already on the porch, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. Uncle Nate? Ryan greeted, his voice casual but laced with an undercurrent of tension. Burning the midnight oil? Nathaniel stepped outside, closing the door behind him. What are you doing here, Ryan? Ryan's smirk widened. Checking in. Thought I'd see how you were holding up. Nathaniel crossed his arms, his expression hard. Cut the crap. You've been following me for days, watching my house, showing up unannounced. What are you after? Ryan's eyes gleamed in the dim light. The same thing you are. The truth. The truth? Nathaniel echoed, his voice low and dangerous. What truth is that? Ryan took a step closer, his smirk fading. Ellie trusted me. She told me things she'd never tell you. And now I'm starting to understand why. Nathaniel's fists clenched at his sides. You think you're so clever, don't you? Playing the grieving nephew, the loyal confidant. But you're just as much a parasite as everyone else. Ryan's expression darkened, his voice dropping. You're scared, aren't you? Scared that everything you've built is about to come crashing down? Nathaniel took a step forward, his voice a harsh whisper. Stay out of my way, Ryan. You don't know what you're getting into. Ryan didn't flinch. Maybe not, but I know one thing. You're not the man Ellie thought you were, and I'm going to make sure the world knows it too. For a moment, the tension between them was electric, the air crackling with unspoken threats. Then Ryan turned and walked back to his car, his movements deliberate. Nathaniel watched as the sedan disappeared down the driveway, his jaw tight. When he returned to the study, Camille was waiting, her eyes wide with apprehension. What did he say? Nothing worth repeating, Nathaniel muttered. He set the box on the desk and opened it again, pulling out the notebook. What are you going to do? Camille asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel's eyes burned with determination as he flipped to the page with the word Persephone. Whatever it takes, he said coldly. This ends now. The faint glow of dawn filtered through the curtains as Nathaniel stared at the word in Ellie's notebook. Persephone. He had been awake all night, his mind churning through possibilities. The name had to mean something. Ellie wasn't the type to leave random breadcrumbs. It was deliberate, calculated, and maddeningly elusive. Camille appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, though the answer was obvious. Nathaniel didn't look up. "I don't have time for sleep." Camille hesitated, then stepped into the room. "You're going to burn yourself out, Nathaniel. If you don't take a second to think—" "I've been thinking," he snapped, his voice sharper than intended. He turned to face her, his eyes bloodshot. "And all I can think about is that Ellie's game is working. She's controlling everything, even now." Camille took a cautious step closer. "And what about Ryan? He's not just sitting around waiting for you to figure this out. You know that, right?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Ryan doesn't know what he's looking for. He's grasping at straws, hoping to find something that gives him an edge. But this—" He held up the notebook, the word Persephone, glaring back at them. "This is the key." Camille frowned, her arms crossing over her chest. "You're assuming it's a name. What if it's not? What if it's a place or a code?" Nathaniel froze, the words sinking in. Slowly, he set the notebook down, his mind shifting gears. "A place," he murmured. "Or a thing." Camille nodded, watching him carefully. "Ellie loved mythology, didn't she? Persephone, the goddess of spring. But she was also the queen of the underworld." Nathaniel's eyes flickered with recognition. Ellie had been obsessed with Greek mythology, filling their home with books and statues that paid homage to ancient stories. Persephone had been one of her favorites, a figure of duality, light and dark, life and death. It wasn't just a name, it was a symbol. He stood abruptly, grabbing the notebook and heading toward the door. "Come on," Camille blinked. "What? Where are we going?" "To the garden," Nathaniel said, his voice filled with urgency. "Ellie always said Persephone reminded her of the seasons. If she left a clue, it might be there." Camille followed him outside, her steps quick and uncertain. The garden stretched out behind the estate, a labyrinth of hedges, flower beds, and stone pathways. It had been Ellie's sanctuary, a place she spent hours tending to with meticulous care. Nathaniel moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the space like a predator stalking prey. Camille trailed behind, her nerves on edge. "This feels wrong," she muttered, "like we're disturbing something sacred." "Ellie's secrets were never sacred," Nathaniel said coldly. "They were calculated." He stopped suddenly, his gaze locking onto a stone bench near the center of the garden. At its base, a small statue of Persephone stood, her delicate hands holding a pomegranate. Nathaniel crouched down, running his fingers along the base of the statue. "There's an inscription," he said, his voice tight. Camille knelt beside him, squinting to read the words etched into the stone. "What is buried shall always return to the light." Nathaniel's breath hitched. He stood and began pacing, his mind racing. "She's mocking me," he muttered. "This whole thing is a sick game." Camille grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. "Or she's telling you where to look." Nathaniel froze, the weight of her words settling over him. Slowly, he turned back to the statue, his gaze narrowing. "The roots," he said softly. "She's buried something here." Without waiting, he began digging at the soil around the base of the statue, his hands tearing through the dirt with frenzied determination. Camille hesitated, then joined him, her fingers quickly becoming caked with earth. The morning air was filled with the sound of their labor, the faint rustle of leaves overhead. After what felt like an eternity, Nathaniel's hands struck something solid. He paused, his breath shallow, and carefully unearthed a small metal box. The edges were tarnished, the lock rusted, but it was unmistakably Ellie's. Camille sat back, her chest heaving. "What is it?" Nathaniel didn't answer. He wiped the dirt from the box and carried it inside, his movements deliberate. Camille followed, her anxiety mounting as they returned to the study. Nathaniel set the box on the desk and grabbed a letter opener, prying the rusted lock open. The lid creaked as he lifted it, revealing a stack of documents and a small flash drive. "What the hell is this?" Camille whispered, leaning over his shoulder. Nathaniel pulled out the papers first, his eyes scanning the text. They were legal documents, contracts, bank statements, and correspondence with a law firm he didn't recognize. But it was the flash drive that held his attention. "We need to see what's on this," he said, his voice taut. Camille hesitated. "What if it's something we can't handle?" Nathaniel's gaze snapped to hers, his expression hard. "We don't have a choice." He plugged the flash drive into his laptop, the screen flickering to life as the files loaded. There was a single folder labeled Persephone. He opened it, his breath catching as a series of videos appeared. Each one was dated, the earliest going back years. Nathaniel clicked on the first video, his heart pounding. The screen filled with Ellie's face, her expression calm but determined. "If you're watching this, Nathaniel," she began, her voice steady, "it means you've found what I hoped you never would. Persephone isn't just a name, it's a reckoning." Camille gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Nathaniel leaned closer, his eyes locked on the screen. "For years, I trusted you," Ellie continued. "I believed in you. But trust, like life, is fragile. And when it's broken, it's irreparable." Nathaniel's hands clenched into fists. "What is this?" he muttered, his voice low and dangerous. Ellie's gaze seemed to pierce through the screen. "You thought you could manipulate me, control me, but you underestimated me, Nathaniel. Persephone isn't just a goddess, she's the light that exposes the darkness." The video ended abruptly, leaving the room in heavy silence. Camille stared at the screen, her face pale. "There are more videos," she whispered. Nathaniel didn't move, his mind reeling. Ellie had known. She had planned for this, and now everything was unraveling. He clicked on the next video, his resolve hardening. Whatever Ellie had hidden, whatever truths she thought she could use against him, he would find them, and he would destroy them. "This isn't over," he said, his voice a cold whisper. Camille's gaze flickered with fear, but she nodded. "What do we do now?" Nathaniel's eyes burned with determination. "We finish it, once and for all." The room was suffocatingly quiet, the kind of silence that made every breath feel amplified. Nathaniel sat at the desk, his eyes glued to the laptop screen, frozen on the paused image of Ellie's face. Her words from the video echoed in his mind, each syllable a deliberate dagger. "Persephone isn't just a goddess. She's the light that exposes the darkness." Beside him, Camille hovered, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was pale, and her breathing came in shallow, uneven bursts. "There's more," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She left more." Nathaniel didn't respond. His hand hovered over the mouse, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He knew he had to click the next video, but every instinct screamed at him to stop. Whatever Ellie had planned, she had done it with precision, with intent. These videos weren't breadcrumbs, they were landmines. Camille's voice broke the silence again, more insistent this time. "Nathaniel, if you don't—" "I know," he snapped, the sharpness of his tone cutting through the tension. He ran a hand over his face, the exhaustion weighing on him like an anchor. "I know." He clicked the next video. Ellie's face appeared again, the same calm determination in her eyes. But this time, there was an edge to her expression, a steely resolve that sent a chill down Nathaniel's spine. "You think you're invincible, Nathaniel," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "You think the lies you've built will shield you forever. But lies have a way of crumbling under the weight of truth." Camille inhaled sharply, her knuckles white as she gripped the back of the chair. "This isn't about revenge," Ellie continued, her gaze piercing. It's about justice. For every betrayal, for every secret, there is a reckoning. And you've left more than your fair share of skeletons in the closet." Nathaniel's throat tightened. He leaned closer to the screen, searching her face for any hint of vulnerability, but there was none. Ellie wasn't just speaking to him, she was confronting him. The video ended, leaving only the faint hum of the laptop in its wake. "What does she mean?" Camille asked, her voice shaky. "What skeletons?" Nathaniel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. He began pacing, his movements quick and agitated. "She's trying to rattle me," he muttered, his tone sharp. "It's all a performance. Ellie loved her games." Camille stared at him, her brow furrowing. What if it's not a game? What if she knew about us? Nathaniel froze mid-step, his back to her. For a moment the room felt impossibly still. "She didn't," he said finally, his voice cold and clipped. "If she had, this would have played out differently." "Would it?" Camille pressed, her voice rising. "Nathaniel, think about it. She left these videos for a reason. She left the planner, the statue, everything. She's pointing you somewhere." Nathaniel turned to face her, his eyes dark with frustration. "And I'll figure out where. But not if you keep panicking." Camille looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she exhaled shakily and sank into the chair. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you need to move fast. Ryan's not going to sit on his hands forever." Nathaniel's jaw tightened at the mention of Ryan. That smug, self-righteous little parasite was undoubtedly digging into the same clues, chasing the same trail. If Nathaniel didn't stay ahead, he risked losing everything. He sat back down, his hands steady now as he opened another file on the flash drive. This time it wasn't a video, but a scanned document, a legal agreement between Ellie and a private investigator. "What is this?" Camille asked, leaning closer. Nathaniel didn't answer immediately, his eyes darting over the text. The investigator had been hired to monitor him. His blood ran cold as he read the details. Meetings, financial discrepancies, unexplained trips. It was all there, meticulously catalogued. Dates, times, photographs. "Ellie had me followed," he said, his voice barely audible. Camille's face drained of colour. What does it say?" Nathaniel scrolled further, each line tightening the vice around his chest. The investigator had flagged several red flags: large transfers to offshore accounts, meetings with questionable associates, and photos of Nathaniel with Camille. Camille gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She knew. Nathaniel slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing through the room. "This doesn't change anything," he said firmly, though his voice lacked conviction. "Doesn't it?" Camille shot back, her voice trembling with fear and anger. "If Ryan gets his hands on this, if Hughes sees this, it's over, Nathaniel. Do you understand that? Over!" Nathaniel's fists clenched at his sides. He moved to the window, staring out at the dark expanse of the garden. His mind raced, calculating his next move. Ellie's plan was unraveling faster than he could control. She had left behind a perfect storm, and now it was closing in from every direction. "We need to destroy it," Camille said suddenly, her voice resolute. Nathaniel turned to face her, his expression hard. "Destroy what?" "The flash drive," she said. "The videos, the documents, everything. If no one finds it, then—" "Then what?" Nathaniel interrupted, his tone cold. "Do you think that will stop Ryan? Or Hughes? Ellie left breadcrumbs everywhere, Camille. This is just one piece." Camille's shoulders slumped, her desperation palpable. "Then what do we do?" Nathaniel moved back to the desk, his movements deliberate. He opened the planner again, flipping to the page with the word Persephone. The clues were all connected. He just needed to see the pattern. "There's still one place we haven't looked," he said finally. Camille frowned. What are you talking about? Nathaniel met her gaze, his eyes sharp. Ellie's office at the foundation. She spent most of her time there before she died. If she hid anything, it's there. Camille hesitated, then nodded. Then we go tonight. Nathaniel shook his head. Number? It's too risky. The foundation has security, and Ryan will be watching. We wait until tomorrow. And what if Ryan gets there first? Camille asked, her voice rising. What if he already knows? Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Then we make sure he doesn't. The air between them was thick with tension, but Camille didn't argue further. She knew better than to push him when he was like this. Instead, she crossed her arms and stared at the closed laptop, her mind churning with the weight of everything they had uncovered. The house felt colder now, the shadows longer, the silence heavier. Nathaniel knew the storm was building, the final act of Ellie's game drawing closer. But he wasn't going to let her win. Not now, not ever. This ends tomorrow, he said, his voice low and filled with resolve. Camille nodded, though her expression was far from confident. Tomorrow, she echoed, her voice trembling. Nathaniel turned back to the window, his reflection barely visible against the dark glass. For the first time in years, he felt the creeping edge of fear. Ellie had always been a step ahead, and now, even from the grave, she was proving it. But he wouldn't back down. He couldn't. Not when everything was on the line. The next morning, the air at the Foundation's office carried a strange weight, as if the building itself was bracing for what was about to unfold. Nathaniel parked a block away, his eyes scanning every passing car and pedestrian. He didn't trust the quiet. It felt too deliberate, as though Ryan, or worse, Detective Hughes, might be lurking just out of sight. Camille sat in the passenger seat, her fingers twisting the hem of her blouse. Are you sure this is a good idea? It feels like we're walking into a trap. Nathaniel didn't take his eyes off the building. Ellie left her final move somewhere in that office. If we don't find it, Ryan will. Camille exhaled sharply. And if Ryan's already in there? Then we make sure he leaves with nothing, Nathaniel said coldly. He opened the car door, the chill of the morning air hitting him like a warning. Let's go. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as they approached the side entrance. Nathaniel had spent enough time at the Foundation to know the layout intimately. The back door would lead to a stairwell, bypassing the main lobby entirely. Camille pulled her coat tighter around her, her footsteps quick to match his. How are we even getting in? It's locked, isn't it? Nathaniel smirked, pulling a small set of keys from his pocket. Ellie always trusted me with the extras. Convenient, Camille muttered, though she didn't question it further. The lock clicked open and they slipped inside, the faint hum of the building's heating system the only sound to greet them. The stairwell was dimly lit, its walls painted with the kind of neutral beige that felt impersonal, almost sterile. Nathaniel led the way, his footsteps deliberate but quick. Camille followed closely, her eyes darting nervously at every sound. Ellie's office was on the second floor, tucked away at the end of a long corridor. Nathaniel reached the door and inserted the key, his hands steady despite the tension coursing through him. The lock turned with a soft click and he pushed the door open. The office was exactly as he remembered it. Ellie's meticulous touch was everywhere. The neatly stacked files, the perfectly aligned pens on the desk, the soft glow of the table lamp casting a warm light over the room. It was as if she had just stepped out for a moment and would return at any second. Camille closed the door behind them, her back pressing against it, as though she were holding the world at bay. Where do we even start? Nathaniel moved to the desk, his hands running over the smooth wood. Ellie never did anything without a reason. If she left something, it'll be here. He began opening drawers, his movements swift but careful. Camille moved to the bookshelf, her eyes scanning the titles for anything out of place. The room was thick with tension, the kind that made every sound feel amplified. "Here," Camille said suddenly, pulling a book from the shelf. It was an old leather-bound volume of Greek mythology, its pages worn and slightly yellowed. "What is it?" Nathaniel asked, moving to her side. Camille opened the book, revealing a hollowed-out space in the center. Inside was a small key, its brass surface gleaming in the light. Nathaniel took it from her, his brow furrowing. "A key to what?" Before Camille could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. They froze, their eyes locking in shared alarm. "Ryan," Camille whispered, her voice barely audible. Nathaniel's mind raced. He pocketed the key and motioned for her to stay quiet. Moving to the door, he pressed his ear against it, straining to hear. The footsteps stopped just outside. "Nathaniel!" Ryan's voice called, smooth and mocking. "Are you in there?" Camille's eyes widened, her breath quickening. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He opened the door just enough to step into the hallway, closing it behind him before Ryan could see inside. Ryan stood a few feet away, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. His smirk widened as he saw Nathaniel. "Well, well, what are the odds?" "What do you want, Ryan?" Nathaniel said, his tone sharp. Ryan shrugged. "Same thing you do. Ellie's secrets, her truths. You can't honestly think she trusted you with everything, can you?" Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "You're wasting your time." "Am I?" Ryan's gaze flicked toward the office door. "Because it seems to me like you're digging just as hard as I am." Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous growl. "Stay out of this, Ryan. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Ryan laughed, the sound cold and hollow. "You think you can scare me? I'm not Ellie, Nathaniel. I'm not afraid of you." Nathaniel's fists clenched at his sides, but before he could respond, Ryan's eyes shifted to the hallway behind him. "Hello, Detective." Nathaniel turned sharply to see Detective Hughes standing at the end of the corridor, his expression unreadable. "What a surprise," Hughes said, his voice calm but laced with authority. "All my suspects in one place." Ryan smirked, his confidence growing. "Detective, I was just explaining to my dear uncle here how transparency is important in matters like these." Nathaniel's stomach twisted. Ryan wasn't just playing games, he was trying to bait him, to turn Hughes's attention squarely on him. Hughes's sharp gaze moved between the two men. "Interesting. And what brings you both to the foundation on a Saturday morning?" Nathaniel forced himself to remain calm. "Ellie's affairs. She left, loose ends, and I'm trying to tie them up." Hughes arched a brow. "Loose ends?" Ryan's smirk widened. "You mean the kind of loose ends that require sneaking into her office?" Nathaniel's fists curled, his nails digging into his palms. "It's not sneaking if you have a key." Hughes stepped closer, his presence commanding. "Gentlemen, I suggest you both leave. Now, anything Ellie left behind will be reviewed through the proper channels." Nathaniel opened his mouth to argue, but Hughes's sharp gaze silenced him. Ryan looked smug, but even he didn't push further. As they walked out of the building, Nathaniel's mind churned with frustration. Hughes had interrupted at the worst possible moment, and Ryan's smug expression only fueled his anger. In the car, Camille broke the silence. What now? Nathaniel pulled the key from his pocket, his eyes hard. "We find what this opens." "And if Hughes or Ryan gets there first?" Camille asked, her voice trembling. Nathaniel's grip tightened around the key. "They won't. Not if I can help it." He started the engine, the car roaring to life as they sped away from the foundation. The storm was closing in, but Nathaniel wasn't about to lose. Not now. Not ever. The cold steel of the key pressed into Nathaniel's palm as he paced the length of the room. It felt heavier than it should have, as though the weight of Ellie's secrets had somehow transferred into its small frame. Camille sat in the corner, her nerves fraying with every second of silence that stretched between them. "Nathaniel," she said finally, her voice soft but urgent. "You need to stop and think. If Ryan and Hughes are already on this, we don't have time to guess. We need to figure out what that key opens, and we need to do it now." Nathaniel stopped abruptly, his grey eyes sharp as they fixed on her. "I know what it opens." Camille blinked. "You do?" "The safe," Nathaniel said, his voice tight with certainty. "Ellie had a safe installed at the estate years ago. She said it was for important documents, but I never had access to it. She always said it was her business." His lip curled. "I should have known she was planning something." Camille's brow furrowed. "If the key fits the safe, then that means she's been planning this for years. Nathaniel, what if she knew?" he interrupted, his voice rising. "Of course she knew. Ellie never did anything by accident. She saw this coming, Camille. She wanted this moment." Camille hesitated, her eyes flickering with doubt. "And what if what's in that safe isn't what you're expecting? What if it's worse?" Nathaniel's laugh was humorless, almost bitter. "Worse?" "Ellie was incapable of leaving anything simple. Whatever she's hidden, it's meant to ruin me." Camille stood, moving closer to him. "Then we destroy it. Whatever's in that safe, documents, evidence, anything, we burn it, shred it, make sure no one can ever use it against you." Nathaniel nodded slowly, her words sinking in. "You're right. Whatever's in there, it can't see the light of day." The resolve in his voice was clear, and Camille let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. But the tension in the room remained, a constant reminder that time was running out. The estate loomed ahead, dark and foreboding against the grey afternoon sky. The driveway was deserted, the house standing silent like a monument to Ellie's meticulousness. Nathaniel parked at the edge of the property, his eyes scanning the grounds for any sign of Ryan or Hughes. "Looks clear," Camille said, though her voice was tinged with unease. Nathaniel nodded, gripping the key tightly as they made their way inside. The house was colder than he remembered, the air heavy with an unshakable stillness. Every creak of the floorboards beneath their feet sounded louder, more intrusive. The safe was in Ellie's private study, a room Nathaniel had always considered her inner sanctum. He pushed the door open, the scent of lavender faint but still present, as though Ellie herself had been there just moments before. "There it is," Nathaniel muttered, his gaze locking onto the small safe tucked behind a row of bookshelves. He crossed the room in quick strides, his heart pounding as he knelt in front of it. Camille hovered behind him, her breath shallow. "Are you sure about this?" He didn't answer. The key slid into the lock with an audible click, and the door swung open. Inside was a single envelope, thick and sealed with Ellie's distinctive monogram. Nathaniel stared at it, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for it. "That's it?" Camille asked, her voice breaking the silence. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately. He pulled the envelope out, the weight of it heavier than he expected. Slowly, he broke the seal and unfolded the contents inside. His eyes scanned the pages, each line of text hitting him like a blow. Financial records, personal letters, and worst of all, a confession. "What is it?" Camille whispered, leaning closer. Nathaniel's voice was barely audible. She knew everything. The confession was written in Ellie's hand, each word deliberate and precise. She detailed the affair, the offshore accounts, and even her suspicions about Nathaniel's involvement in her sudden decline. She hadn't outright accused him of poisoning her, but the implication was clear. "She left this for Hughes," Nathaniel said, his voice trembling with anger. She wanted him to find it. Camille's face paled. Then we destroy it. Now. Nathaniel nodded, his jaw tight. He grabbed the pages, his hands shaking as he stuffed them back into the envelope. But before he could move, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway froze them both. "It's him," Camille said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's Ryan." Nathaniel's chest heaved, his mind racing. "Take this," he said, shoving the envelope into Camille's hands. "Hide it." "What about you?" Camille asked, panic rising in her voice. "I'll handle Ryan," Nathaniel said firmly. "Go, now." Camille hesitated, then darted out of the room, the envelope clutched tightly to her chest. Nathaniel straightened, his face hardening as he moved to the front door. Ryan was already there, his smirk firmly in place as Nathaniel opened the door. "Surprised to see me?" "What do you want, Ryan?" Nathaniel asked coldly, blocking the doorway. Ryan's eyes gleamed with smug satisfaction. "Oh, I think you know. Ellie's safe, her secrets. Let me guess, you've already found them." Nathaniel didn't flinch. "There's nothing here for you." Ryan's smirk widened. "We'll see about that. Hughes is on his way. You've got about 10 minutes before this place turns into a crime scene." Nathaniel's blood ran cold. "You called him?" "Of course," Ryan said, stepping closer. "You didn't think I'd let you burn Ellie's legacy to the ground, did you? Whatever's in that safe belongs to her, not you." Nathaniel's fists clenched at his sides, his mind racing. Ryan had backed him into a corner, but he wasn't going to go down without a fight. "This ends here," Ryan said, his voice low but firm. "You've spent your whole life manipulating people, Nathaniel. But Ellie saw through you, and now so does everyone else." Before Nathaniel could respond, the faint sound of sirens pierced the air. Time had run out. Camille appeared in the hallway, her face pale but resolute. "What do we do?" Nathaniel's eyes burned with desperation and fury. "We leave." Now. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the back of the house, his mind racing with the weight of everything he was about to lose. The sirens grew louder, and for the first time in years, Nathaniel felt the creeping edge of panic. Ellie had won, and there was nothing he could do to stop it.